So thank you, everyone. Welcome back to our webinar series, Embracing Change. We have Tsitsi from Harare, Zimbabwe, who's joining us today as a family advisor specialized on the African continent, but of course serving families in many other countries in the world, focused on governance and philanthropy and the alignment of that piece presently and going forward. So thank you, Tsitsi, for joining us today. Absolute honor and privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Feisal. It's always an honor to have a conversation with you.
Thank you. I love the color. So we're going to start on the bright side of life. Huh? Maybe we should start singing. Huh? I know you're
Absolutely.
wearing it. Huh? I know you're wearing it for different reasons, but
pink always brings. There was a time I had pink hair too, to just brighten up the room. So yes, pink is my color.
All right, perfect, perfect. So today we're going to talk about Ubuntu, right? And I just want to start really, gently and just kind of walk through the process. What is that, right? And what does it even mean? And how did it impact your life as a next gen? And then we can kind of go to the broader picture. So if you don't mind, start with the basics.
Right. So Ubuntu, I think, is a term that has been used so many times in so many places, but it's been made more famous by the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu when he spoke about Ubuntu and tried to explain it in depth so people would understand it. It comes from the African continent, African cultures, especially the Bantu cultures. Within Southern Africa, you find the word Ubuntu has got many deviations or variations. In my native Shona language, we say Hunu, which alludes to Ubuntu. And Ubuntu, loosely translated, is I am because we are. So meaning that I stand here because of the collective of people who stand behind me, beside me, and lift me up to be who I am. We are a sum total of the community. And I think we've seen it even in English lit and conversation, where we say that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we are also a sum total of those people that we allow within our spaces. So when we think of Ubuntu, I am because we are in the African context. And as you asked, when I think of it, I think it's my family, it's my friends, it's my community, the people I grew up around, when they came together, which is in Africa is one of those things, we come together for everything. If there's a wedding, the whole community comes and provides something towards the wedding. So it could be someone who's donating a dress, somebody who's donating the suit, somebody who's donating the food. You're never alone within the African context. Everybody works together to make sure that things are accomplished for your greater good. And equally so, they expect you to return that same extension of charity, that extension of presence and holding the space. So for me, I'm thinking every major event in my life, I have seen aunties and uncles, friends, family, neighbors. They check up on you. They provide food, they provide shelter, they provide support. You're never alone. And therefore, Ubuntu, I am the sum total of the people around me that hold me up.
Okay, so that's an incredible support system, right? It's a village that raises the child, right? And that's
Absolutely.
where I guess I'm hearing. But at the same time, I can imagine it comes with, like you said, it's expected, an obligation. So how does that feel? Do you feel that obligation, or is it just becomes inherent and it doesn't feel like a chore or something you need to kind of push yourself to do? Because there's got to be a little bit of, with every incredibleness comes a little bit of sourness, right?
Yes, I think so. I think resentment towards Ubuntu comes from misunderstanding what it is and what it symbolizes.
Okay.
When you are raised within the culture of Ubuntu, it comes naturally to want to help the next person. It comes naturally to want to extend your hand to give the next person, and it's not giving under duress or I have to, but it's that joy in seeing things come together. Like the example I gave of a wedding, where whether you're a rich man or a poor man, you can get married because people will come together and provide with what little they have. So you don't have to bring a cow. If you just have a bag of sugar or a spoon of sugar, you're not judged by what you bring to the table. We embrace everything as it comes because it's a gift. Somebody is taking from the little that they have and they're willing to give to make sure that we all are able to celebrate. We are all able to move on to the next step in our lives. So we've seen it when we send children to school. Sometimes there's some family members who can't afford to take their children to school and other family members step in. There's times where I think almost every African child is that story where if they went to boarding school, their parents couldn't send tuck money or send tuck, but there's some aunt who was in the diaspora or some aunt who had a little bit of money or some uncle had a little bit of money who sent tuck money, who sent a cousin to bring food. And it's, where can I step in? And we are always looking for spaces where we can hold the space for the next person, because it's almost like you're paying it forward, which is a term that's now used a lot in the Western world about paying it forward. Whereas we naturally look to pay it forward. When we hear somebody is struggling within the community, we ask, how can we pay it forward? Do they need us to just sit with them? Do they need us to provide something, whether it is physical, whether it's spiritual? What is it that the next person need? And people never feel alone. It's almost like, if you see in the West, there's that need for old people's homes because life moves too fast. There's that spirit of Ubuntu isn't as prevalent as it is in Africa, whereas you will see that old person in the village, but their home is never empty. There's always somebody visiting them. There's always somebody checking up on them. It's simply because with that culture of Ubuntu, you always check on the grannies, you always check on the grandfathers, you check on the ill people, you check on the people who are having a good life, because you just want to be there and say, if you are needing of me, I am there to assist.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah, it's so now we're talking about, schooling, we're talking about graduation, for example, marriages, funerals. Now, what about if we bring that to the business context?
Mm-hmm.
Is Ubuntu also relevant, and is it the same process, or does competition and my piece, your piece kind of start to play out?
I think this is one of the biggest struggles that we faced on the continent, because when it comes to Ubuntu, we are a collective. Individual business sometimes can be very individualistic. When we're thinking of, I've built this company for me and my children, we're thinking of the individual and their offspring. So I'm thinking me and my immediate children. The concept of Ubuntu in its entirety dictates that I am not alone and I am not the sole decision maker, and other people must be involved. And the African culture can be a very brutal culture in its enforcement. I think I have seen it, I've witnessed it, I've experienced it, where no decision can be made within a family without the consent of the elders. So, and being an elder doesn't necessarily mean by age, but it is by rank. In African culture, you need to understand the ranks, which I think when you look at the governance structures that we've seen globally when it comes to family governance, where you have your family council, family assembly, and regular meetings, we already do that in the Ubuntu culture within the African context. Whereas in every year the family comes together in some way. The family assembly comes together in some way. People who share the same totem, the same lineage, they come together in some place, in some way, under a matriarch or patriarch or family banner. The family assembly happens without default, except during COVID. And when you have, even during COVID, I remember I had my cousin who got married. She got married in Germany, and we had a family council for her marriage, her lobola, where we joined from across the world. Wherever we were, we had every representation from her mother's side, from her father's side, and her siblings. Everybody who was in that family hierarchy had to be at that family council to acknowledge the marriage of the child. And it's because that is the way the culture has always been, even pre-COVID, post-COVID. If a child moves across the oceans, goes to Australia, the UK, decides to get married, lobola must be paid. If people cannot come home to do it in the family homestead, we will do it online. We'll make sure everybody is present, and everybody who plays their role within the family council must be present. Now, when you take it to translation and business, it can be a difficult one because there's always that reluctance for people to plan ahead, where we don't have wills in place. And sometimes we struggle with having conversations about ownership, where we say, we'll talk about it later. And because we don't want to hurt feelings, and we're not quite sure how to navigate culture as well as navigate wealth when it comes in the business context. And so you find when someone passes and there is no will,
Wow.
the legal aspect can step in and say, right, this is what the law dictates. But on the African continent, unwritten, it's written in the sand, but in concrete that lies under the sand, where you know that there will be a council that will sit down, and there will be an acknowledgement that there's a death, that a family member has died, that this person was a part of our family, whether it's the totem or the genetic hierarchy. The cultural Ubuntu requires that the councils must sit and acknowledge the death. And within burial, there is another council that sits and then dictates who gets what from what the deceased has left. And in this case, where there's a vast wealth, the legal aspect steps in. And that can become very tricky in the African context, because if the council doesn't agree with what the legal aspect says, do you then cut off your family? What do you do? Do you then say, I am no longer related to these people? Do you cut off the whole Ubuntu system? Because in the African context, if you do not cut off just your hand, you cut off your whole head. It's almost saying, I am no longer part of the system. The whole system then steps back and says, okay, we're allowing you your space. And that's when you feel the pressure of being a black sheep or being ostracized from the power of Ubuntu, whereas everybody was stepping in and providing the strength, the support, the advice that you needed. You're now left to make decisions alone because you did not comply with what the council dictated. And it's very necessary when somebody is alive to start navigating conversations with these councils within the Ubuntu system, to be very clear about their needs, why they've chosen that, and how it fits within that gathering of Ubuntu, that gathering of council. Because I have seen families who've navigated it where the council sits and then says, as far as the estate of the deceased is concerned, we're defaulting to the spouse and the children. The family and the council will support their decision. So you get the whole force of Ubuntu pushing through the decisions that have been made by the respected or the acknowledged family.
But the thing is, from an outsider, when I'm hearing this, right, and that if there is a potential misalignment between the legal and the council, why is the council not putting pressure, or whatever the word is, to have responsibility, to have the will and the paperwork and clarity? Like, to me, that sounds a bit, I don't know, a bit off.
I think it also then goes to taboo, where culture within itself is the way we do things around here. And the way we do things in most cultures across the globe is we fear death because we do not know what happens after it. And we then avoid the consequences of those that remain living because they have to carry on with life. And within discussing, we feel like when we discuss death, we're opening the door into our home for death to enter. We haven't yet gotten to a point where we acknowledge the fact that, and I always say this in the most crude way possible, which is, if somebody celebrated your birth, there will be somebody who will get condolences for your death. It is an inevitable journey. It's inevitable. It's if it starts, it must end. The only thing that does not end is time and its perpetuity. But life in itself has a cycle. You will be born and you will die. When that happens, you will leave people behind, because during the time of your life, whether it's 6 hours, 6 years, 60 years, 600 years, there are people who felt that you belonged to them or you were part of them, and their lives changed because of your presence, and their lives will change because of your absence. It becomes our responsibility to step into the fact that if we love other people, let us prepare them for the time that we are not there, because it's inevitable, it will happen. Our cultures, no matter where you go in the world, we fear death. It is that cold, slimy hand that nobody wants to face, nobody wants to feel touching them. Yet it continues to touch us every day in so many ways, whether it is a person that we love who passes on, or that ant that you trampled because you were in a rush and you didn't even see it. Somebody is crying over the death or the loss of somebody. And being conscious of the fact that the more you amass, you've created a lifestyle, you have created a way of living, a way of existing for a group of people who depend on it. And it's negligent on any part for us to then feel like, well, they'll figure it out when I'm not there, or the council will make a decision, because not everybody has good intentions, and we need to recognize that as human beings. Not everybody has good intentions. I mean, um, from the beginning of the pandemic up to date, we have seen so many global events happen, and we have seen that not everybody has good intentions. And it's not specific to an area or a specific tribe or a skin color, but it's general. Not everyone has good intentions. And more so when you've built wealth, wouldn't it make sense for you to protect your wealth for those people who you love from those people who do not have good intentions? And another thing with death is, initially when the death stroke hits people, people have good intentions. They want to do good by their loved ones. They want to honor the legacy of the person who've passed on. But life then happens, and their own life takes over, their own pressures take over. And sometimes their decisions are no longer fueled by the passion of honoring their loved ones, but more of protecting their own good. So sometimes inheritances are misused because somebody had an emergency investment or an emergency something they wanted to take, and they were like, let me borrow from there, I will give back. But then because there is no one following up and saying, did you give back? Those intentions become a problem. And the council can sit and try to investigate, but sometimes it's too far down the line, and you get well, I don't have the money anymore.
So you're hopefully spending time in the advisory space, supporting families to be more, as you use the word, responsible for those who we leave behind, in order to, leave clarity, right, as to,
Mm-hmm.
in a consensus manner, or at least in a structured way, right, that doesn't leave people in limbo, and hopefully doesn't create the chaos that you're referring to, of intentions initially being in good faith, and then life takes over, and people start to drift because
Mhm.
it's and everybody can justify themselves,
Mhm.
right, for that
Mhm.
space. So now how does how does this apply on a global scale, right? So what
Mm.
can families, I mean, first in Asia, the same thing that you're speaking to, many don't write wills
Mhm.
because they feel it invites death. Many
Yeah.
don't attend funerals because they feel it invites death. So the
Mm.
first talk I did in Asia was actually on death, and it was at a family office conference.
Wow.
Post that, I ran a 2-hour workshop on death. Okay, so
Wow.
so
Yeah.
I obviously asked who
Mhm.
gave my number to ask me to speak, right? Because it was pretty shocking. I thought they were trying to hang the foreigner, right? Because I'm a minority here. And but
Yeah.
interestingly, and we can share notes offline. We ran recently a workshop for a EO forum of 7 on death.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mm.
and at the end of a 5-hour experience, when
Mhm.
we were driving to the restaurant, they turned to me
Mhm.
and said, "This was the most nourishing experience of the soul."
Mm. Mm. Mm.
See, so
Mm.
it's not that I would challenge that. It's not that we don't want to talk about it. We just don't know how to, and we don't have the space, the safe space in order to do it. So that talk opened up the opportunity to have a conversation they've never had the opportunity to have or didn't have the context to have it.
Mm.
Right? So
Mm. Mm.
I would
Mm.
challenge, some of the assumptions we make, right? And and of course we do this, but so coming back, so how can we apply this? Because what I'm hearing is the yin and yang between the me and the we, right? That's what
Yes.
I'm seeing,
Yes.
right? I mean, I'm in Asia, so right, we're in the yin and yang world, okay? So
Yes.
in this case, it's clear that the we is paramount, but
Mhm.
is the me lost within the we, or is that identity still maintained? Because in Asia, the me is lost within the we, and we need to work on finding the me back. So
Mhm.
how is it there?
I think the me is recognized and seen and acknowledged because there's that when you look at the tradition of the African cultures, especially the spirituality, there's a lot of recognition of the power of the soul and the spirit of the individual person.
Okay.
And even when you see the traditionalists, they call on the individual people, and they then call on the collective
Okay.
because they have a lot of respect of the individual soul and its journey and its contribution. And then they also then acknowledge the fact that as an individual, there should be that consciousness that you are going to, whatever you do, good or bad, bring the fruits of that into the collective,
Okay.
because you are, but we are because of you, and you are because of us. So I think it's the same thing. Whereas in you, when you carry a family name or family totem, you are a representative of the clan. You may have your own identity. You may be acknowledged as so and so. However, you are a representative of us when we are not there. Um, and I think every person, especially within the African culture, which makes it very dynamic, um, there is that conversation around the honor culture being part of the African culture. But you find that within the honor culture, one of the biggest issues that, especially in the West, that's been happening is when you are doing your family councils and so forth, it's the blending of the generations.
Okay.
Our culture allows the blending of the generations because it gives roles to individuals from birth,
Okay.
which play out throughout their lives. So as you see, Tsitsi, I am a child of one house, and I am adopted to the married family that I marry into. Into my house, into my family, I'm recognized as part of their clan. Into my husband's family, I'm recognized as an outsider. I will never truly be part of their family because I carry a different totem. And although I carry their surname, I am of a different clan. My children will never be part of my family because they carry my husband's clan and my husband's totem. So when it comes to any way that my husband's family treats me, they have to treat me with respect because I carry a different totem and a different clan name. And if my children do anything that transgresses or what we would say is disrespects their mother, their family has to pay a token of apology to my family because I do not stand alone.
Oh, wow. That's
so
wow.
That also means if they want to, if there is any ceremony that my children must be part of, so that is a marriage or even a death, my husband's family must come to my family and say to my family, the child of your child has died. So whether I'm alive or not alive, it doesn't matter. They must have a representative from my family who represents me. And so I carry the role of mother. And that transcends even in my family, whereas I consider a family council with elders. If I have no older sister or older female relative who can play the position of mother, because I was born into that position.
It's very structured, very
exactly. Structured. So
wow.
Let's say I pass on and my children want to get married later on in life, 30 years on. They cannot have a marriage ceremony without going to my family and saying, the child of your child is now getting married. We need a mother, a representative from your family, representing her mother from your clan with her totem, to come and sit there and bring weight and honor to the ceremony as the mother. And even if my child dies, or like if a child dies, there must be, I must sit at the head of my child's coffin while everybody else sits at the feet, because we believe that the mother is the one that holds the head of the child. So there will always be a mother.
Yeah. Ours is the heaven is at the feet of the mother.
Yes. Yeah. So there will always be a mother.
Okay.
In all your councils, there will always be the role of mother.
Okay.
And it's not by age, it's by presence. And so if all my older sisters or my aunts are not there, I take on that role. I am then given that seat at the table to represent them. And what the power of that is that you can have multiple generations that sit at the same table and bring different perspective, which is difficult in other cultures where it's done by hierarchy of, oh, this generation only and this generation only. In our culture, it doesn't stand like that. It's what role does this person play? So I'll take example, my son. My son will always outrank me.
Wow.
So, and in his family, my son will always outrank me. They will not ask me for my opinion because I am not part of his clan. If my husband was to pass on today, they would not ask me where he is to be buried. They would consult because I'm his wife and say, did he mention where he wants to be buried? But because they have a tribal or a family place where they already get buried, if I wanted to challenge that burial, I would then have to go to my son or my husband's brothers to challenge it. Wow. I hold no water in their councils.
Okay.
I only hold water when it comes to my children.
Okay.
So it is an intricate and fascinating way, but you just know, like, you know, from birth, as you grow older, how you are treated. I have cousins who are younger than me, but because they're my, like if they're from my mom's side of the family, they automatically all become my mothers. I must treat them like my mom with the same due respect, and I must call them mother.
Wow. Okay.
So it's either older mother or younger mother. If there is no word for aunt and uncle in the
Oh,
African cultures.
oh, it doesn't
So
exist.
no, so
Okay.
there's hi Uncle Faisal. No, 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 no. It's either Faisal is your mother or Faisal is your father. So if it's hi Baba Faisal, that means it's you either older father or younger father. Or it's either Sekuru, which means mother or a male version of mother. And either way, you cannot be addressed on a you. They, like I always say, there is no you in African languages. It's a problem. That word is a problem because I can say you, Faisal, you, not in my culture. You have to first think, who's this person? Do they outrank me?
This is like
And
this is like a sophisticated army.
exactly, it's extremely so. And you're like, and how do I greet them? Because how I greet them will then determine the conversation I can have with them.
Yeah.
And even if they're younger than me, if they outrank me, I must greet them and treat them within their rank.
Okay.
And I think that order of things helps the whole system continue to perpetuate. You cannot kill the community, you cannot kill the culture of it. And as much as we modernize it and so forth, we always go back to it because we know there's no aunt, there's no uncle, there's no you in our linguistics. It's if it's you, it's I'm talking to you as my friend and we're having a mutual chat. But when we come into the crux of things, I have to think very carefully, is Faisal my friend? If I'm related to him, then which rank does he have? Because at some family council, he will be a decision maker. And you don't want to rub him off the wrong way.
Okay, so that means, so what I'm hearing is that, see, because when it comes to Western families, it's my cousin, my second cousin, and at that point, you're not even, you're relevant. If you're in a multifamily business with many generations, then of course we're relevant because we're shareholders, we need to coexist, et cetera, et cetera. But otherwise, you're relevant yet irrelevant, right? So here, by just the terminology of no uncle, no auntie, and just
Mhm.
mother and father already, demystify, like it basically takes away that extension, right? It brings it closer, right? And
Mhm.
everything is in proximity from what I'm hearing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So how
Yes.
can we, from the Asian world or the Western world, or what can we learn from that, and what can we apply? Like what can we consider to bring into the governance or our culture or our day to day?
Mm. I think understanding relationships and the value of them, because the intricacies that I was briefly unpacking to you, like you said, brings everybody closer. People don't remain strangers. And I think when you look at the governance frameworks that we're trying to implement for wealthy families and family businesses, it's based on trying to keep the family together after it gets to cousin consortium because it's too big. Whereas in the African context, we don't understand too big because everybody's within proximity. It's
You
everybody's
get
within
you get worried if it
proximity.
becomes too small. Then
Yeah,
then we've got an Ebola situation, right? Which we know is not
exactly.
a good joke, but
Exactly.
African to African we can joke, right? I'm born in the Congo.
Absolutely.
Just to clarify, this is not a derogatory comment. We had
So
lots of Ebola in the Congo, so but
yeah,
yeah, I understand what you're so big is normal, right?
big big is normal. It's not as complex as people think it is because when I'm explaining it, it looks complex. But when you're experiencing it, you just know where every puzzle piece fits in. You know everybody's role and you know why it is important. It is not oppressive as people might think, where they think, well, if there's too many mouths to feed,
Yeah,
because I look at it from the context of when we're building family wealth and family businesses. The strength of family businesses and families of wealth is within the context of, if we are doing it for family and so that our family lives better, is better. If we focus on keeping our business small, then we're focusing on keeping our family small, because inevitably, as the family grows, the business must grow to be able to cater for the needs of the over expanding family. And whereas, and sometimes the business is not going to be able to cater for everybody. If we work together to ensure that the business grows in a way where everybody can benefit from, you'll find that there will be growth. And you start identifying things like the 5 capitals of wealth. Who in our family is actually able, in terms of human resources, to work for the family business? Who has got the right skill set? Who can bring value within the company, or can be placed outside the company doing something else, but still bring value to the family? What intellectual capital do we have as a family collectively from our experiences, no matter where we are in the globe, can be used to grow the family business or the family wealth basket to ensure that we all benefit from it? The idea should not be minimizing the beneficiaries, but maximizing the growth of the business so that it can also support the growth of the family, because growth is inevitable. When we start businesses, it's mom, dad, and a couple of kids. Just like with any families, I mean, all these clans we see now on the continent didn't start as clans. It was mom, dad, and a couple of kids.
Yeah.
And well, now it's like, oh, we have a lot of kids around here. Who does that one belong to? So it's, as we are learning from the African culture, I think what we should learn is, how do they make the intricate relationships work? How do we take away the distance between us and bring everyone in closer, but at the same time create a strong team? Because we know that teamwork makes the dream work. When we work together, we can do so much more. And when we don't look at the next person or extended family members as the enemy, because sometimes when we get resentment towards the family business or family wealth, it's coming from somewhere. Let's explore where it's coming from. Let's understand where it's coming from, because if it's part of our financial security as a family, and we're going to hire the best minds to help us, shouldn't we be helping them help us to align with each other, so that we can continue to build the wealth? And shouldn't we be having more events or collaborations that bring us together, like within the African context, where everything is a family council waiting to happen? And I mean everything. I mean, you breathe, they're like, yeah, baby was born, let's have a family council and name it. Okay. I mean, we have family councils for pretty much everything. And the culture of it sometimes can be like, it's overwhelming. But when you start maturing and you start seeing the world for what it truly is, which is a collection of relationships, you realize that it's the relationships with the people you already know, the people you grew up around, the people whose names are familiar, who, when you look into family albums or look into your family story, they are there. When we start collaborating with those people, we start creating with those people, and we start creating reasons to know them, reasons to spend time with them, reasons to get them on board and use the skill set that they have, because every family member has a skill set. If they don't, there's a reason for it. As a collective, if you find, when you start shielding the weaker people, is because you've identified them. You can't shield something you cannot identify or do not see. It's important for us to learn on a global scale, why do the intricacies of African families work? Why are they clans? Why are like monarchies like the Zulu kingdom, where you have like multiple wives and multiple children? They're like just big. Yet amidst the clashes that they have, when they come together, they come together. They're one clan, one voice.
Yeah.
We need to look at that, because we're trying to replicate that, saying let's use this framework of family assembly and family council. But do we truly have the glue that holds us together? have we defined these relationships and redefined them? Because we might say, oh, the culture is different, but culture is simply the way we do things around here. It takes us to start changing how we do things around here, to create new cultures that work. And it takes us to learn from people who are doing it and say, how are they doing it? How can we make it work for us without changing who we are as an identity, but just bringing in the values that we see other people doing and bring ours closer.
But I think the first piece that you stuck on, right, was not the divisive piece, right? That 1 + 1 = 11. And this was even myself when I was running partnerships. People say, hey, so why are you sharing half your profits with another person? And you could tell they don't get it. They don't get that 1 + 1 = 11. Therefore, I'm getting 5.5, not half. And I think that's what I'm hearing, is that how do we shift that? And then also that the experiences that you have, right, as you grow up and as you contribute and are part of the system, eventually become those that you actually are participating in to manage the collective, right, or to participate in the collective. So it's kind of a lifelong process. So therefore, it's not that all of a sudden I'm part of the family council, all of a sudden I'm on the advisory board, or I'm on the board, which is happening in our part of the world, right? That all of a sudden you're appointed certain things, and there's some participating and some not. Some who are active, some are not, right? So and you go to family meetings and you can see who's more relevant than others, right? And in your case, you're saying the position is there, but at the end of the day, everybody's relevant in their own way, right? And
you are born into it.
Yeah.
You're born into it. I mean, I was born, I had no, in the different families I'm in, my mom's family, my dad's family, my husband's family, I have roles that I play, that I need to play. And when I'm called to play the role, I do not question, or neither do I fight and resist. I do what is necessary because I was born into it. At some point in time, I know I will be called to serve, and I will be called to serve for the greater good. So my decision is not based on my wants and my needs. It's based on the collective good of everyone else. So I could have not talked to any branch of that family for many, many years, but they know I exist. And when they need my role to be played and I am the closest, they will call me and they will say, you are called to serve. This is the situation. There is a child in distress, and that child is any family member at whatever age, they call it a child. And you are needed as an aunt, as in Tete, which is the biological aunt, as the mother, as the uncle, as the father, whatever role at that point in time, they won't look at my age. It's almost like when it comes to death, if somebody dies, only the person from their clan can draw or make a marking where the grave will be dug. So if I died, my husband's family can't just go ahead and cremate or go ahead and bury the body. They must call someone from my family to come and just make a marking. So it could be a child, a 3-year-old, and just say, make a cross there, because they believe that the soul of the deceased will only recognize their clan.
Okay, so the bloodline.
Okay. Exactly. So if you bypass that, it will come back at some family council where if there is conflict or whatever in the family, they'll say, because you didn't do something right.
So how does
you didn't do something
so
right.
when you're speaking to the non-African families, right? Those who are not part of this, is there acceptance? Is there resistance? Do they see a way that this is applicable, or do they push back and say, yeah, that's not us?
I think the most important thing for me is understanding their culture. What is it that they believe to be their culture? What has been done in the past? Because understanding the African culture for me, and it's not a homogeneous culture. because we have so many. It's a culture that is different from tribe to tribe, but there's a lot of similarities that you can then pick up. And so it's important to, no matter what family you're dealing with, to go in and each family, what do they believe is their culture? Where does this culture emanate from? How has this culture helped them? And what elements would they like to adopt from a culture like mine, sharing my culture and seeing and sharing other cultures that I've come across and seeing, would this be of something of interest to you? Would you like to adopt some of the thought processes behind it? Okay. Because we only adopt the elements that are useful to us. There's some elements that are not useful to us at all and that won't make sense to us. And I'm sure even with the African culture to get to where we got to, it was building on experiences and seeing what worked and what didn't work. And similarly with families, no matter where they are in the globe, it's when it comes to governance, you need to deeply understand what is their identity, what is their history, or what do they believe their history is, and what has worked for them. What do they feel hasn't worked for them? Because one of the things people don't realize is we don't have these conversations. We just carry on with life. We just do what's in front of us. We adapt. As human beings, we have been told to adapt. The world shut down. We went online. We're like, okay, we can't visit people anymore. Let's go online. Like, we're like, oh, my family relocated to another part of the world. How do we get together communication that allows us to first talk to people across the world and then to see them across the world? Naturally, as human beings, we are looking for solutions that help us adapt to what we're facing. If we realize that continuity and generational wealth is based on us being able to adapt into and create cultures that perpetuate, and also understanding that money is a currency, it flows, it comes in and it goes out. If you block its flow, it disappears. If you allow it to flow, you have to create an environment where it feels like it is respected, it is welcome. If in a family there's conflict, there is no flow. You're blocking flow. Eventually, you're going to start losing wealth. You're going to start losing health. You're going to start losing relationships. So understanding all these things, understanding our history, where do we come from? What is our shared history? Where is it that all these value systems, all these cultures, and do they really work for us? And then sharing our current value system, where we are now, what we would like to see going into the future, how we would like to keep currency flowing within the family, and then planning a vision, a collective vision where we're saying, let's explore these opportunities to adapt things that probably weren't there or things that have fallen by the wayside and see how they work for us and create something that's unique to us, because we work for this money. We want to keep this money flowing. And the best way to do that is look at it as in, this is a challenge for us. How are we going to overcome it?
I love it. I love it. It's like basically water, right? The Chinese say it's like water. Sometimes you're a river, sometimes you're a pond, sometimes you're a waterfall. It's
Absolutely.
the fluidity. And what I'm hearing
Absolutely.
from you, it's about the fluidity, right? About the
Yes.
viscosity of that flow and the relationships and the communication. And those pieces are what starts to create blockages where it starts to inhibit the flow, right? And it's how do you create that adaptable, agile environment. And in your case, it's the Ubuntu, process that allows you or creates that foundation, the soil for adaptability and agility based on what you need to grow in that moment in time for that generation and the next. Beautiful.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Absolutely.
So we're coming to an end to our conversation. Is there something you'd like to share that you didn't touch upon or reinforce to remind us that, this is not a plug and play, which I was trying to push you, and I saw you knocked me out. You played very well cricket or whatever sport you wanna call it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's not a plug and play. It's really a self-reflective process to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then it's an opportunity to reconsider, which I love, right? And I
Yeah.
love the fluidity bit. So, is there anything else that you want to share in terms of? I mean, this has been beautiful. So thank you for the incredible time we're spending together, and people that are listening are really in gratitude for your time and your wisdom and your experience.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the one thing I would like to just share with people is that life in itself is a journey. And as I alluded to, when we start our journey, we are not conscious of what is going on. We are born into an environment and we adapt to that environment. And we change as we grow, we change as we become, and we change as we continue in that journey. Who we were is not necessarily who we become or who we are. And we must be okay with making mistakes. At the same time, we must always be okay with learning. There is no trump card or no full stop when it comes to learning. It's an experience within itself where we can learn from everything and everyone. Sometimes by sitting and watching children having conversations, you can learn something new. Allow yourself to learn, because within learning, you can borrow from different cultures, different people, and you can start syncing it with your own life. You can start creating your own culture. Don't be pushed into the dogma of saying, this is our culture, because culture is just the way we do things. And the way we do things has evolved because we as a human race has evolved. And we need to be conscious of the fact that in that evolution, where do we fit in? Because in the true spirit of Ubuntu, I am because we are. I am a sum total of a decision that is made by somebody who sits way across the world from me. And they are also impacted by my decision. So being conscious in this world is being able to say, whatever I do will impact others. As I learn, let me just learn to be a better human and be able to bring those that I already know closer to me, because as I allow the flow in me to flow to them, they allow the flow in them to flow to others. And we start creating that essence of Ubuntu that keeps on growing and growing and growing, because we have seen, because of COVID, we are all interconnected. Ubuntu is not a theory, it is a fact. The question now is how we use this fact, especially within our families, as we consciously build wealth. How can we continue borrowing from our grandchildren and teaching them that they're only borrowing from their own?
Wow, beautiful. I love it. The co-creation, the coexistence, the interdependency, right? I am me thanks to you. Without you, my existence would just be, a limited experience. So I love that. I love
Yes.
that. So thank you, Tsitsi.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We have your dear friend going to be speaking in our next webinar, Nike, who's going to talk
Uh-huh.
about leadership in the next gen, supporting women. So
Uh-huh.
going to have that conversation next week. So thank you for introducing us. I know you introduced us, so that was beautiful. And again, Nike,
Yes.
Tsitsi, thank you for your time.
Uh-huh.
And everybody will be grateful for the experience they had. And let's hope that the world and consciousness shifts as we move through the experience of COVID and beyond, and all the choices that different leaders are making, that we try to learn from the Ubuntu way and choose consciously to make the world a better place. So again, Tsitsi, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank
And
you.
thank you
Thank you so
for your
much.
time.